we're now working on the waiter position or waiter sweep position. So we'll get into it now. I'll show you with Hugh what it is and just a quick overview of what we'll be covering. All right, so waiter, we'll cover a few entries into this, but it's basically when Hugh's going to drop his knee down and then we can enter the waiter position, okay? So you've basically got your opponent's leg floating like this. So I've got his leg floating and I've got my leg still in front and my other knee still kind of blocking as well with my foot on the other side. So I've kind of got my inside leg carrying the weight of this leg, right? So if I was to take that leg out, this would basically be half guard or deep half guard. And if this leg was to be underneath, this would be something like single leg X, right? Now, why would you get into the waiter? Like, what's the advantage of going into this position? Well, it's very good for getting into leg entanglements, such as single leg X guard, and for starting to chase the back. Okay, so I want to start looking to come out towards taking the back, right? There are main options. Obviously, there's some other options to transition into positions such as 70-30. We'll cover that. So we can be looking to pass the leg across the body here into 50-50 and some of the attacks there. We can get into X guard on this leg, and we could potentially be getting into X guard on the far leg as well, going onto this side. We will break it down into two, like I call this the waiter position where Hugh's dropped his knee. Sometimes you will have people standing, especially on entry, so if they're standing up, we will cover what to do here as well as some entries. Some entries we will cover in other sections to waiter. We'll kind of like, for example, from De La Riva to waiter, whereas some that will be covered in the De La Riva section in more detail, whereas some entries such as from deep half guard or from half guard we'll cover in more depth in this series, this part. Just a bit more detail on our options and just an idea of when we will go for what. We'll obviously go into this a bit more detail later, but just giving you a good overview. Okay, so if Hugh has this leg nice and light and he's not blocking my leg, that's usually when I'm going to shoot into something like single leg X and attack the leg. Okay, so when I've got freedom to keep his leg up and take this leg to the inside, I can start to attack straight footlocks or just get to the single leg X or a modified version of that here where I can start to set up attacks. If now Hugh puts a lot of weight down on this leg, that usually gives me a chance to attach to the other leg and work into a modified X guard on this side. If Hugh's weight's kind of upright and he's not leaning forward too much, which is not too common against someone experienced in dealing with this, but you can use the standard waiter sweep where I can tilt Hugh backwards and start to roll on top. In the scenario where I can lift Hugh's leg up, often that's going to allow me to pummel my foot inside as a hook and start to pop out the back for crab ride style back takes. Or sometimes in the instance where I can't get my hook, but I can elevate the leg and start to spin through towards the back, I can pummel my foot in front of Hugh's chest and start to come out to the back with almost like a reverse half guard or a berimbolo style back take from here. And lastly, sometimes Hugh will sit all the way backwards on this hip and block my leg, and he's trying to free his leg like this. I'll stay down. And like, it's very hard to do any of those things before. In a scenario like that, we'll be looking to take the leg across body into a position like 70-30 here, where we can attack the heel or try to get up. So just before we get into this, each of the concepts and strategy, our ideal positioning, and you'll understand this as we go through it, is that we're rolling our hips back. We bring the foot up right up to our knee and chop back against that. We have our inside leg hooking down near the calf here, and our knees covering our shoulders, so there's no room for an underhook. And then we've got our arm either underneath for a C grip or an underhook. This is kind of our ideal waiter positioning to start to set up attacks. So it's important to understand what the person on top is trying to do to block you and prevent you from getting your attack going, so we can understand what they're trying to achieve and how to deal with that. So one of the most common things you'll see, person on top will block this leg. Okay, if I don't block this leg, it allows Hugh to pummel the foot inside and start to get into like single leg X, which would be an upgrade in Hugh's positioning generally. Okay, so we're going to go back, and the person on top will usually block that shin to prevent that leg from being able to pummel back over the top. Now, in doing that, that can lead to another defense is often they will work the foot so far by pushing, they get to the point where they can actually free their foot out of the weighted position, either by pulling it all the way back, sometimes even pushing the hand and freeing the foot and retracting it back into something like a half guard. Something we really need to be aware of is not giving this underhook. Okay, if the person on top gets an underhook, I can start to attack Hugh's arm here. Okay, from here, I can work to attack arm bars, reverse triangles. There's a lot of bad things that can happen if they get that underhook. So as the person on bottom, be very wary to not allow your opponent this space to reach that underhook. You might get your opponent sitting down. Okay, so this space, the more space from my leg to the ground is generally more space for Hugh to spin underneath towards taking the back. So a lot of people will actually sit down to their hip and kind of drop their leg straight. You can see now if Hugh wanted to spin under this leg, go for it. It's a much more difficult task to achieve, especially giving up things such as there's the underhook as you do that. Okay, so you'll often see people dropping down to the ground, making that difficult. Another thing you might come across is people driving their weight this way. Basically, I can't really do that without standing up. Okay, so if I don't want Hugh, for example, to get into single X or a lot of these attacks, I might start driving my weight this way. Okay, it's going to make that very difficult to get underneath this leg, but of course that will, as we said before, expose this leg for Hugh to start to attack something like an X guard. Very common question you'll get is like how to deal with people trying to footlock you from weighted guard. So obviously this foot is starting to poke out. You will get people that start trying to attack straight footlocks and potentially even heel hooks from on top here. Okay, so that's definitely something we can defend and prevent. It shouldn't really happen if you're doing a good job on the bottom of protecting yourself from that footlock. You might get people trying to pop their hips over the other side. So you can see my hips are on this side of Hugh. A lot of times the person will work towards reverse half guard. If I can scoot my hips over to the other side of Hugh like this, I can start to try to work into a reverse half guard position and try to pass from there. Okay, so for that, Hugh goes underneath again. For that, Hugh needs to be ready to either block me going to the other side, or there is a chance to start to work towards someone's back. So just again, they will be trying to get their hips to the other side of your head and usually block your leg from being able to attach to them as they get into reverse half guard. Lastly, there are some crab ride counters that can occur. Okay, these are usually when Hugh goes towards my back, I can also potentially go towards his back. Okay, so or try to counter as he does that. So as he spins his head underneath, there's two ways people will deal with this. This is more advanced, but I want to teach this because I think a good bowler player will try to counter you here. So if I can swing my hands to the inside of Hugh's legs, I'm going to fall to the side, and this is going to give me a leg drag. Okay, so when it rolls through, you see I come up in a leg drag, right? So I've managed to, in that case, as Hugh's swum through, I've managed to get between the legs, and you can see I'm basically in a leg drag. I just need to roll back over. I'm in that leg drag position. And it could be that Hugh feeds this leg over the top. So I take this through, and he comes up like he's doing the berimbolo, and you get people will sit down and pull the hips on top into a counter berimbolo as well. All right, so we need to, when you get into the back take, which is the back take part of waiter, which I think is actually one of the most high percentage things, but it probably takes the longest to develop, you will want to understand how people will try to counter that so that you get excellent at it and it becomes a really good option to go for. We're getting into concepts and positioning and strategy now. So what are we thinking about? What's the positioning we want to be? And where do we want to go? And what are we trying to deal with? Okay. So I don't want to get underhook. That's the first thing we're talking about. So leaving a big gap here where you can reach for an underhook is going to be a big problem. Okay, so one of the main reasons I think people will get underhooked is see how I'm kind of flat here, and I'm just gripping the foot with an overhook. Okay, it's very easy for you to reach an underhook here. I don't want to play the weighted position like this, kind of flat on my back. I really want to roll my hips back and make that difficult. Make this space here kind of hidden. So see how my legs aren't protecting my arm at all? If I can go back here like this, so I'm bringing my knees pretty much over my shoulder. If Hugh tries to underhook through here, he's going to struggle to get there. See, my own leg will block that. Okay, just turn a little. So again, if I roll back like this, I'm keeping my knees tight. My hips are off the ground, and I'm kind of balled up. This is a better way to positioning. Okay, try to underhook now. Okay, so that's going to be difficult to get, right? Now we can talk about, so even if I got an overhook, if I keep my elbow tight to my body and Hugh tries to underhook here, that's going to be difficult, right? Generally, we'll talk about this later, but if I underhook, it's better. Even if Hugh gets an underhook, when I have an underhook of his leg, he's unlikely to separate my arm from the leg. Whereas with an overhook, when I say overhook, I'm just talking about gripping over the leg. It doesn't necessarily have to be like this. Usually it's actually the hand. But here my elbow's open and he could potentially separate that and start to attack. So an underhook is generally better in that regard. But you will often on entry, and just as you're working through the positions, you'll often have just a grip like this. So you need to have your legs reinforcing your arm, and my hips need to be rolled back on top like this. If I feel Hugh is really digging for that underhook, often bumping him forward like that. So just actually like accentuate that roll and make his weight go forward. He's either going to have to roll over or post with his hand to defend. So if he starts looking for the underhook, I roll back, he puts his hand on the mat, he lost his chance to underhook, right? If you're late again, so let's say I'm here and Hugh's going for the underhook, I need to pummel my own underhook myself. Not to keep an underhook, I'm not doing it to stay here. I'm just blocking his attempt, okay? So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to try to lift the leg up, bring the leg towards me. So do it again. I use my legs to bring the leg towards me, and then I can start bringing my hand underneath and save myself from being underhooked. You need to be quick at this, because if he gets a good hook here, I can't get this back now. Okay? So you need to be recognizing early, pummeling, and then changing your grip, or at least hiding your underhook with your leg over your shoulder. So already touched on this, but rolling back onto your shoulders, hips off the ground. There's a few reasons why I want to do this, not just for the sake of the underhook. Okay, so I want to be keeping this leg. I want to keep attached to the leg. You can see I'm very outstretched here. So if you potentially at back heels or kicks backwards, I could possibly lose the leg, especially if I try to change grips. If I'm trying to change from an overhook to an underhook, as soon as I let go, I lose everything. When you roll back, you have the foot close to you. It gives you a lot more room. You can actually use your legs to trap their leg too. So when I roll my hips back here, I have my knees to my shoulders. I can have my other foot actually changing even to hook this near leg. All right, we will talk about changing our grips a little later in more detail. But now I can freely, it's hovering over the top, and my feet can reinforce the leg. So if Hugh tries to kick off now, see my legs are holding it in place. I can more freely change to either push the leg up, underhook, or grip at the ankle. I can change between those grips when we're in a situation like this, but not when I'm flat on my back. Right? Another really important thing is I can start to pummel my feet better. If I'm flat with my hips on the ground, even here, I don't have the available range of motion to even go to single leg X here. Okay? I can't actually get my leg through. Right? When I roll back, I can use my leg now to kick up and make space to pummel my foot through and get to single leg X. I will also have the ability to spin on the mat. When I'm flat here and I try to spin, it's very slow. I expose the underhook as I come around. I want to spin on the spot. I don't want to rotate like this. I want to spin more on my back, like so I can pivot like this and start to work towards the back. So by rolling our hips back, we get much better positioning to use the weight to attack. another important factor is keeping Hugh's hips at distance from me. Okay, so if Hugh crowds me, he brings his leg close, his hips close, and his leg's bent like this. He's quite heavy on this leg. I want this leg light. Okay, so if I try to elevate here, I can't. If I try to change to single leg X, I'm too jammed. If I try to invert or spin underneath, I'm too jammed as well. This is not a good position to be in. Okay, so I'm kind of crowded and facing away from him. It's going to be a difficult task. So you need to be active and proactive at keeping your opponent away like this. Okay, so you can see if Hugh's hips are away, I can lift my hips up nice and easy. I have plenty of room to start to spin. There's a big difference in these two positions. So how do we do that? Often, or majority of the time, it's my inside leg. Early, you might even use your foot to kick, just so he can't close that gap by moving in. So I might straighten out on his leg, and this will give me room now to bring my hips up and start to change into the position I want. Okay. Once the leg's elevated like this, I don't have to be as worried about Hugh coming in, because as he drives in, I can start spinning towards the back. The action of him moving in when I'm like this helps me with the spin. But early, before I'm in position, I really don't want him coming across like this, right? So I can use my leg here. I can use my right leg as well to kick the hip, okay, like this. So if Hugh starts trying to drop down, you can see my leg will assist with that. My arm can help as well. And again, this is usually just to give me enough time to roll my hips up. Once my hips are up, I'm in a much better position. You can even occasionally use your top leg. If Hugh drops his knee down in a bit, often I'll go here just to give a bit of space now. So my top leg's helping me, then my right leg can come in, and then I can roll underneath and get into the position that I want. Okay, so in general, to keep the distance, I've got my hand, I've got my foot kicking, I can hook to make space, I can potentially, in the scenario that comes in, use my top leg to kick, but all of this is just giving me enough time to curl in and roll my hips up and get into a good weighted position where I don't have to worry about this as much. Do I want my head to be closer towards the leg or closer towards the hips or towards the leg this way? Okay. Well, we're going to mix this up depending on what we're looking for and what's happening. Okay. Generally, if my head's moving away, that's great when I'm trying to go into something like single leg X or trying to feed across into any of the 50-50 variants. So I'm trying to feed the leg across the body like this or get underneath the leg. That's when I want my head away from here. Whereas if I'm looking to spin towards the back to any degree, I want my head coming underneath that gap. Okay. Now, so I will probably generally work this out based on what I feel is available and what threats are at place. If I feel I can elevate the leg and put my foot underneath, as soon as I see I can get my foot under, I know I can start going to single leg X, I will start spinning my head away. If I feel like that's jammed and he's holding my leg too well, I don't feel like spinning away here is a good option. It's not because he's blocked my single X entry. It doesn't really feel like it's helping me at all. Okay, so if he's blocking that leg, I'm going to be tending to spin more underneath towards the back to threaten that. If I feel like the underhook's a big threat, I'll often spin away. Okay, I'm making the underhook go further away from Hugh. If he starts getting the underhook and I start spinning under, that'll often be giving him more purchase on that arm. Okay, so if he starts to get it, I might spin away, deal with that. Okay, now come back when it's hidden and continue to work towards the inside. Creating space to spin underneath. We've got a few ways we can do this. Basically, the main thing I'm trying to do is make sure there's enough distance for my head. So if Hugh's too jammed, I won't be able to spin under. And there's enough distance under the leg. So just drop your hips really low. Here, I'm going to struggle to spin under as well. Okay, so I'm going to want the foot up high. This is one of the main things. If the foot's up high, I can really spin on the spot. I don't have to spin under Hugh so much. It's just spinning on the spot, and I can start to look to come out towards the back. So how do I elevate the foot? There's a few mechanisms for this. Most of it's going to come from my hips and my legs, working like pistons, one leg and then the other. And each time one goes up, you get to pummel the other one into a better position. Okay, my hands will assist as well. But so first off, the back roll. From down here, you won't lift the leg well at all. I need to have my hips up above me. So my inside knee can now start to lift, and I can start to then, see my right leg pushes up, my left leg pulls back, and I can start to kind of float the shin on top of my shin. Okay. Once I have that, I can elevate with my shin, and that now lets my right leg start to step under as a hook potentially, where I've now kept the foot elevated. He can't close this gap. I can start to spin. Okay. So, and obviously there's different variances in exactly how you do this, but rolling back, lifting one, lifting with the other, and then replacing with your foot. If you can eventually get a hook underneath, this is great because when I spin out, I've got the crab ride hook and I can start to take the back. Now in terms of my hands, because we can overhook, we can underhook, but actually the best is, well, for lifting is to grip. Okay. Often you can't just change to that first because he's going to retract his leg out the way. So I need to roll my feet back, use my leg to assist so he can't change. Once I've elevated his foot a bit with my hips, I can get underneath it and keep it up with my hand. Okay, once my hand's holding it, my shin can assist, I can step underneath. Varying different ways we can place our leg to create space, to start to spin underneath and out towards the back. So the three main grips we're going to use, we've got just a grip on the outside of the leg. I'll call it an overhook. It's not quite a hook with the elbow like this, but I'll call this an overhook for simplicity. We have the underhook where I'm underneath the leg like this, elbow deep usually for that one. And we have the kind of C grip to lift the leg up in the air. Okay. So when would you use what? Usually the just regular overhook grip is you use that because it's how you entered. You know, a lot of the time our entry will have this grip. It's not the best in terms of attacking, but we'll often enter with this grip. So we're going to be keeping on to our grip here and looking usually to change this grip when we get the leg up. Okay, so then we've got two different grips from there, the underhook and the C grip. The C grip is primarily when you feel like you want to elevate. So when I do this, I'm really thinking about going to leg entanglement or taking the back. So if I can lift the leg that high, which is really good, this is probably the best case scenario. I can start to go into single leg X. I could pass the leg across, or I can start looking to spin out towards the back. The underhook is probably less versatile than elevating the foot, but often a little easier to get given certain scenarios. You often won't be able to change from an overhook to an underhook in a scenario like this where my hips aren't up yet. If I try to change here, take your leg back, I can lose everything. So changing when I haven't elevated my hips yet, when I've just got an overhook towards an underhook here is risky because I could lose the leg. Same if I try to change to that C grip, I'm likely to lose the leg. So really try to elevate your hips first. Once I'm here, there's still sometimes risky to change to an underhook. Even now, see how Hugh's weight's back out this way? If I try to change to an underhook here, he'll probably remove his leg. Okay. Whereas the C grip is often a more smooth transition. I don't have to actually let go. I just change my palm from the front to underneath his leg to lift it. Whereas the underhook, I actually have to let go, which can be a little more risky. Okay. So generally I'll change from overhook to underhook if Hugh comes forward a bit more. Okay, now I feel this is easy. Yeah? He's almost like trying to plant his leg on the ground, and I can use that now to get a good underhook. Right. In terms of our options when we have each of these grips, they're quite similar. You know, some of the differences will be that when I get an underhook, I can now, if I change to face him for a leg entanglement, it'll be more like something like X guard. See how I've got the underhook and the leg on my shoulder compared to with the C grip, where it would have been something like a single leg X, or potentially looking for something like an Aoki lock. The obvious advantage of an underhook relative to the overhook grip is the ability of Hugh to underhook me. Okay, so once I've got my underhook, I'm usually very tightly guarding this space between my elbow and my core, compared to there's usually some opening of the elbow with the overhook, so we need to be more aware of that. So in summary, in terms of our arm positioning, if we can get this C grip and lift, that's probably ideal. That might be harder to get if his weight's coming forward. It's going to be hard to lift the leg. Okay? In a scenario like that, it's generally better to get an underhook. Okay? So the underhook is generally a better grip to have than the overhook grip, but ideal, their weight is away and you've got enough space to get the C grip and actually elevate the leg. But just be wary when you change your grips, because if you're already almost losing the leg and he's starting to pull away, so I'm gonna sit back and he's pulling away, if I try to change here, I'll probably lose everything. I'm gonna talk about the crab hook, which is one of the controls we're gonna look for, which is where I elevate the leg and I pummel my foot inside and knee on the outside like this. So you can see I've got my foot on one side and knee pressured on the outside, like so. Okay, this is a great control to look for when we want to take the back. All right, so first off, it's difficult to get here. In fact, I would recommend not trying to get the crab hook from this side-on position here. It's only when my head starts to come through and I can lift the leg. Okay, when I can lift the leg, I have room to pummel that hook. If you try to do it here, you'll probably just not collect anything and be wasting time and potentially giving your opponent a chance to attack. Okay, so that's it. There is one way we can get it, which we'll cover. It's a bit more advanced. We can get the crab hook sometimes by changing our feet into a reverse weight position. Okay, so I've got my my right knee inside, left leg outside. I can sometimes go left foot inside, right leg outside, and then spin, and that will become the crab hook. Okay, so sometimes you will take this leg out early, but otherwise, we want to wait till we elevate the foot and pummel our foot inside. Now I want my foot on or below the knee line, like this, and I want to have my knee coming above the knee line on the outside. Okay. The idea with this hook is it stops Hugh from putting his foot down to the ground, which gives him a chance to rotate and move. Okay. I want to keep his foot elevated as I spin out to the back. Right. So by going here, I get my crab hook. I can start to keep his foot elevated, pull his hip down, and he can't step his foot on the ground, at least until I get good positioning out the back. The last thing I want to talk about is not losing this leg. I don't want Hugh to kind of sit back and free this leg from my grips. Okay, very common thing to occur for people to get out. So this is where it's important, again, that you curl up, and often, like obviously my grip is important, but the grip changes need to occur in conjunction with what my legs are doing. Okay, if my legs are too focused at the hip line, it's very hard to change. If I'm here with my legs, I try to change grips at all, and he takes his leg back, and I lose it. Okay, especially like I drop down to your hip and start like pushing my leg. Yeah, and if I change it all here, I lose everything. Okay, so focus actually more on keeping I don't want his foot touching the ground. So if I just focus more on being at the almost knee and downwards here, it's very hard for if Hugh tries to put his foot to the ground now. This side, like I'm still elevating the leg, that's fine. But I have ability now with my right leg, if I hook it instead of just at the knee, a little bit more inwards, if he tries to retract that leg, okay, my hook here will stop that. Okay. My second leg actually, this leg is often pinching like this, almost like I'm holding his leg with a back heel. It's not extremely strong, but it's enough that if Hugh tries to kick out, it's actually kind of stuck to a certain degree. Okay, so in combination, having these two positions here with my legs, Hugh tries to remove his leg, he's going to find that difficult. I can be using now my legs and my swinging of the hips up to change from an overhook to an underhook or to a C grip, and then I start using my legs to adjust into the position that I want to start to attack. So overall, I'm just talking about the role of my right leg now. So it's going to be to keep distance, keeping Hugh away, kicking, hooking to extend and keep away. Once we've got enough distance, we're then scooting under the shin and keeping the foot and shin elevated so we can start to set up our grips. Once we've got good positioning with our upper body, our foot is going to then work to either stay outside as we go towards the back, pummel inside as a hook, or just keep tight if we happen to go towards more of a leg entanglement approach. The role of my left leg here, it's going to be to protect this space for the underhook by rolling back. I'm going to look to pummel inside whenever I can. So if you can ever bring your foot inside the leg, especially as your head moves away, we can start getting to leg entanglements. And it's also going to be chopping down on the leg, so if Hugh tries to free that leg, it's stuck. And my leg can be using as a chop near the ankle to stop Hugh from being able to free his leg while I start to upgrade my grips. In terms of my left leg positioning, I want it quite shallow, so it's just the end of my foot poking out. Generally, if my knee's quite deep here, I'm more vulnerable to foot locks or even just Hugh controlling and pushing this leg. So I don't want him controlling that too well. I generally want this leg tucked down. Okay? There's no way if he tries to control that leg here or get any sort of overhook on the leg, that's going to be very difficult from here. Okay, so I want my knee tucked down. It protects my shoulder from the underhook as well.
We're going to have a look at control positioning and just some of the things we're looking for generally in the waiter position. Okay, so we'll have a look at some entries and some things we need to look out for. So I think on this one, actually, we'll just go back because I missed the start of that. This is one Sam will be looking to underhook, and we really want to make sure that's difficult to get. So as I'm going to enter in, so I've hooked out on the leg, and I'm going to have to roll my hips back. This is the risky point for the underhook as I'm entering, where there's potentially a gap here for my opponent to get a good underhook. Okay, and you can see Sam's reached in, and I've managed to get my knee in front. So even though he's gone for the underhook, my knee's kind of blocked that. All right, and that's really important. I'm also trying to make distance, keeping the hips away, which we talk about. So I'm going to use my arm here. I believe I'll be using my legs to help. The further I can push him out, the harder it is for him to get an underhook. So there we are. Keeping distance. I even start bringing my leg in to help as a safety net in case that underhook gets bad. Because he's actually got somewhat of a decent underhook here. And by putting my foot in front of the shoulder, that's just reinforced my ability. If I need to go into a retention mode, I can. So now I think he's a bit too far away to make use of that underhook. I'm stepped on the hip, keeping him away, and that allows me then to start to pummel my feet underneath. So we talked about various things we can use to keep our opponents away. We can use our hand, we can use our right leg as I did. My left foot can be pushing away, keeping the hips away, making the leg light, and that's allowed me to now enter into the waiter and then into single X. Also, just note, against that underhook, a general preference to start to move my head away from my opponent rather than close. So if I'm trying to go underneath and bring my head towards the hips, I'm going to be in more danger from that underhook. So moving my head backwards away, you see I'm making more of almost like a 180 degrees angle from my opponent, and that's going to make it safer for me in that scenario. Hips rolling back, so here's a good example of that. See, I'm getting my knees like right over my shoulder, and the foot, having good positioning means I want the foot to come high up onto my knee. Notice the foot down near my butt at the moment, and I'll be pulling his foot right up into that gap where my knee is, and that's going to make it much tighter positioning. There we are. So see how I roll my hip back and pull that up? It just makes it very difficult for Rory to put his foot. If he drives forward, it's hard to put the foot on the ground. Down here, he can, and he can also kick that free easier. By having it this high, it's easier for me to then roll back and change my grip too. So let's have a look at my leg work here. See my right foot changing to the shin. So this right leg then supports that leg. You got to think Rory's got, from what he's trying to do here, it looks like he's pushing my leg to stop me going to something like single leg X, so I can't take my foot in front, and he's potentially going to try and kick that leg out and free that leg that I've got trapped. But by changing my foot behind his calf, it's now difficult to kick out of that. You can see I'm about to change my hand grip here to go underneath. Okay, so I'm no longer got an overhook. I'm now lifting the foot up even higher, giving me more space to start to attack, whether I'm looking to spin or to pass the leg through. All right, we'll just look at that once more. So as I roll under, see my right foot is going to come and attach to this a leg below the line of the knee on the shin to a certain extent. There we are. Okay, that's going to really elevate the foot. That's let me change my hand, and then I'm able to, in this scenario, upgrade into 80-20. Here you can see both feet being active to keep those hips away. So you see my top leg is actually going to assist because Hugh's kind of turning his knee in and dropping his hips in. So I'm going to use my left leg to also keep the hips away. I'm just using that to block my hands pushing away, trying to really separate, get Hugh's weight out this way so I can actually elevate the leg. Notice I have pulled the foot up right into that knee as we talked about, and I want to be rolling my hips back from here. Okay, so there we go. Now my knees, I'm in a good position here. My hips are off the ground. The leg's elevated. My shin is attached to Hugh's shin. This is a better weighter position, and it's going to allow me to set up attacks better. All right, so this one I went back into the bolo. We'll cover some of these attacks a bit more later. Notice the change of this foot to become a hook. So to keep this foot elevated, I've got my arm lifting. I'll go back again and we'll see that a bit better. So you can see I've pulled his foot high already, like we were just talking about. So getting it right underneath my knee line, I'm going to roll my hips back. So I'm kicking him away. I roll my hips back, and I've changed that grip so that I'm now almost gripping under and lifting the foot. And that's going to let my right foot come in and do the same. Lifting this leg higher makes it all a lot easier to attack. So I looked for that hook, actually missed. Now I've got like a grip underneath. So you'll see that again. Change of this grip from an overhook to a grip that can then elevate the foot. Yeah, so in this kind of head closed position, I can do that. And I was looking for a crab hook. He blocked that, but I'm still able to eventually pop out towards the back, which is one of the attacks we'll cover later. So you'll notice from this, there's two main attacks that we're going to be focusing on. That's going to be either working into a leg entanglement or popping out to the back. And each of those has a few different variants depending on the reaction from our opponent.
Covering entries to the waiter position now. And first off, these first two are from De La Riva. This is the most common and probably the best way to go about getting to the waiter position. We're going to cover this in detail in the De La Riva section of this instructional. So check that. This is just a brief reminder of that. Okay, so I've got my De La Riva hook. I'm usually looking to get around the corner, and then as Hugh, I've got my leg back, not stretching too much where I get extended. I'll keep my leg back, and as Hugh steps to follow, I hook and make him step out towards the side here. So as I extend Hugh out the side, I make sure that I don't give room for the underhook by sitting forward so that my shoulder stays close to my knee and curling sideways. Using that pressure, we go back, using the pressure of pushing against this knee and turn to twist Hugh to the side. As soon as his weight's out, I want to keep his weight out. I might step on the leg, I might hook, just keep him away until I can roll my hips up and get into the waiter position properly. We can also get to the waiter by going towards the back from De La Riva if Hugh steps over. So if I start going towards the back and I start moving here and Hugh back steps from here, off from here, I reach for the leg, he drops to his knee, and we end up in the waiter position that way.
So I don't have any live footage of the entries from half guard and deep half guard because I'm trying to play a more open guard at the moment. I think the waiter fits best in that more open guard and De La Riva based game. So that's, as you'll see in the live clips, that's the most common entry. I'm just going to show a quick example of the two different ways we can get to waiter from De La Riva. There's the standard way, which we cover most here. So you can see here against Luis, I'm not putting as good pressure as I'd like, but I want to keep my knee pressuring against his knee, step my foot out, widen his base. There we are. So now you can see the knee pointing up. I don't have the hook of the De La Riva, although you can sometimes have that, but I'm pushing into the knee, making this leg light. So by pushing, it's lifted the foot off the ground, and I start to reach towards the far leg. Notice as I reach, Luis steps back. That gives me, it takes his weight away, and it makes it easier for me to spin underneath this leg. Okay, so you can see now he's dropping down to that knee to move away from me reaching to it. I'm able to roll my hips back and get to the weight up. All right, so we obviously covered that here, and then again in the De La Riva section of the instructional, there's a big emphasis on that. The other way you can get to weight up is going for the berimbolo, so trying to get your opponent's hips to the mats, but actually spinning all the way through, which you'll see here. Okay, so you can see this would be towards the berimbolo, but Hughes blocked my leg, and I can actually spin all the way through and into the weight up position. Okay, so there we are now in the weight up. All right, so this is the exact same thing, except this time I'm going around the leg from the outside as opposed to spinning inwards. All right, so if you watch that once more. Here, I spin around all the way under with my head, and then that leg comes through. Hugh turns a bit, but I end up back in the waiter this way. And then you can spin your head back out towards the bolo again, and you can see these two positions are actually very interchangeable.
So we can enter the waiter position from deep half guard. This is, my personal opinion is not to put yourself in deep half guard to then try and get to the waiter, because there's a higher risk that Hugh takes an underhook and this can be really bad. But if you end up here and you like the waiter position, it can be a good transition to look for. As you can see with the deep half position, I'm gripping onto the hip and my hips are down near Hugh's ankle. I can't reach his leg like I want for the waiter. So when I want the waiter position, I want the leg up basically near my head. Okay, his foot near my head. So I need to bring the leg, the foot, closer to my head by swinging my hips to the side, like this. Right. As you can see, as my legs are turned in, I can't reach the leg because my legs are in the way. Okay, so I'm going to swing my legs this way to bring his leg closer to me. At the same time, I'm going to open my legs and swing them up like this. Okay, so kind of sideways, like this, which allows me to have room to reach the leg. And simultaneously, my head will move away from the hips. So I'm gripping the hip here. As I swing, I put my hand underneath my hips. My head moves away, like so, and I'm now closer towards the leg. Okay, so it's a difficult motion to get used to, but we want to swim, I'm kind of feeding I'm feeding the ankle over the top of my hand, like so, and my feet will roll back and up. Not tight on the leg, I'm not trying to lift the leg. I actually want to open and up, okay, like this. My inside leg will go underneath Hugh's leg here, okay? You see how it can't go under here, but if I swing it wide enough, I can pop it underneath the leg this way, okay? And now I end up in the waiter position. So again, we're in deep half guard. We're hiding our underhook. We put it under our back as we turn. It's reaching under the leg. My head moves away as my legs open, swing out, and I capture the ankle here with my elbow in the waiter position. So common issues with this one, swinging straight back. I'm not gonna get the leg. I haven't turned in to the side. I first need to roll to the side, okay? Then the next common issue is just swinging sideways and getting stuck on my side like this. I actually want to face my hips to the roof. So I swing to the side, face the roof with my hips, and come off the shin above the line of the knee with your leg, so that I can have room to hook the leg. And last one, I need to bring my head away. I don't want to do this all with my head still in front of the hips. Okay? I need to swing my head away as I hook the leg, so I get good positioning in the waiter. We can enter the waiter position from half guard too. It's actually the same entry as from deep half guard. We're going to go from half guard to deep half guard to get to the waiter. So to do that, I need to stretch this leg out of Hughes here. I'm going to sit forward, get an underhook, and connect myself to his hips with my hands. So I'm gonna get an underhook here, and my right arm will reach underneath to attach onto the leg. Okay. What I want to do here is have ability to pull Hugh's hips forward and take his foot out away from his body. I'm going to use my inside leg, my right leg, to do that. Okay. So if you watch this, I'm going to pull Hugh's hips forward and take his leg out like this. Okay. So I have to connect my knee to low down on his ankle to do that. So his leg's bent, he's got his leg back here. And when I pull his hips forward, I slide my leg down onto the calf to straighten his leg. Now it's really important when you do this that I don't allow Hugh to drive over to 3/4 mount. So if you drive that knee over, that's going to be really bad, okay? So what I look to do with my top leg is block the leg going to the 3/4 mount. If I put pressure against the knee, if Hugh tries to go to 3/4 mount here, my pressure in is rotating against that. And with this pressure now I've stretched his leg out, I can swing my legs into the deep half guard, hips up, and capture the weighted position. So again, I attach myself to the hips. This stops him following my legs as I go. Okay, so I want to come through, attached to the hips like this. Now as I stretch his leg out, he can't follow his hips to the leg. Okay? If I didn't have this, and I try to stretch his leg, it doesn't really work. By having counter pressure, pulling with these arms in this direction, as I pull his hips forward, I can stretch his leg, I keep his knee facing in, and then from here, I can swing, pendulum, and get to the weighted position. We're going to break the weighted down now into two key sections, and we're now getting into offense, right? So the first one is going to be when they're standing. So we're starting to enter, and Hugh's still standing like this, and the options I've got to attack from here, and then the other one's when he drops to his knee, and the options I've got to attack from here, right? So the first part is now when he is in a standing position, trying not to drop to his knee. How do we force him down to his knee? Or if he doesn't go to his knee, what does that open up for us? So the first thing we're looking to do is make this leg light. So as soon as I start to enter the weighted position, I want to be keeping Hugh's hips out to the side. We discussed this a bit earlier, but I can be kicking the leg, I can be hooking the near leg. Probably at this point, I'm going to be looking to kick the leg. I'm using my De La Riva hook if I can, or at least my knee, pressuring into the knee to knock Hugh to the side. But I really want the leg light, which means I want to be rolling backwards and pulling the foot up, getting the ankle near my knee. Okay, so I'm looking to get to somewhere like this, okay, where the foot is elevated. This gives me a lot more options to attack. Okay, so as I said, we can be stepping on the leg, hooking to keep it out like this. I can step with my left foot on the hip sometimes. I can come back into the near hip, like so. And as soon as you feel the leg is able to, we're going to be pulling it up right into your knee pit here. When we get this leg light, it makes it hard for Hugh to backstep and move his his left leg over here. Okay, so if it's heavy on this leg, I start reaching for the leg, he can backstep and kick off the weighted position. Okay, if I'm stretching him out and making him light on this leg, he's going to be heavy on the far leg, much harder to move, easier for me to get up underneath and start to set up the attacks. All right, so we've got three main options we're going to go for here, or the three things that can occur. I can start to work towards the far leg, reach the leg. If I reach that leg, I start to change sides into a modified X-guard position where I can start to get up from modified X-guard. A lot of the time as we do that, Hugh drops to his knee so that I can't get into them. Like now, I'm not going to go for the modified X-guard. He's too low. I'll probably get jammed up reaching for that. But it gives me access to get into our proper waiter position where he's dropped down to his knee. So the second option is he drops to his knee. The third option is that Hugh turns his knee inward. So I might be stretching him out and his knee goes in, and it actually makes it very hard for me to attach to that far leg. Okay. In a scenario like that, he's actually giving me good opportunity to switch back into De La Riva and start to go for the berimbolo. So we're first going through the modified X-guard. So as we enter the waiter, I've started to stretch Hugh out. I'm hooking the leg and he's standing up. He's basically, imagine he's trying to put weight back on this leg. So I'm rolling back here. I'm going to attach to the far leg. Now, when I reach to the leg, I don't want Hugh to drop down on my arm. That's going to be a bad outcome. So if you reach to the knee, like this, drop down to your knee now, I can get jammed up. See, my hand's actually kind of stuck under his leg. This is not actually good positioning, or it's not ideal positioning compared to what we could have had. If instead I reach to Hugh's ankle, if he drops his knee down, it has to go forward. Okay? So he has to go like right over the top of me. He's almost giving me a back take by doing that. Okay. So the difference is, if I grab at the knee, he can drop on the spot, like kind of step your foot back. Yes. And my arm can get trapped. Whereas if I hook at the ankle, he has to drive forward and over the top, which will give me the back. So he generally won't want to drop to his knee if I capture his ankle with my arm. So I stretch you out. I can hook the leg, I can kick the leg, whatever I need to keep this leg light and lifting. He's staying up, so I'm going to reach to that leg, and then I'm going to change sides. I now want to keep my right leg tight and get onto my left hip. So I keep hold of the leg, my right knee swings up, and I turn onto my left side, like this. So a complete shift in the direction of my hips. I've gone from my hips facing towards you to hips facing away, right? Now from here, it's the way this leg works, it's like a hook. So even without my bottom leg, if Hugh tries to back step off this, it's kind of difficult, it's stuck. My top leg is just keeping him from even being able to lift the leg altogether. I don't want my knee clear because he can start dropping down in something like a 3/4 mount or nearabouts that. So my shin actually blocks Hugh from covering this gap with his knee, and my hook stops him from kicking off. From here, I can change my left foot to come in front of the knee. So I have my both feet now ready to push or pull. I could push with my foot at his knee to stretch him out, or I could pull in like so, and I've got that hook, right? So I kind of push with my shin to make space for my leg. It might be hard to get, if you're not flexible, you might not get that leg here, but if you push with your shin, you'll make space to get your foot attached. Now that I'm here, I try to put Hugh's hands on the mat. Obviously we'll cover this in the X-guard and modified X-guard section, but I want to stretch him out and bump him forward, hands down to the mat. Once his hands go to the mat, I can step on the back of the thigh, sit up, and start to get up. Obviously cover this in the De La Riva section. I just want to re-emphasize because it is important, but the importance of pushing with your knee into their knee to make the leg light, right? So whether I'm kicking or hooking, when I push with my knee, it lets me make the leg light. If I'm pulling back, it's very hard to lift the leg. So I want to be kind of pushing weight back onto his far leg, so then this leg's light as I enter in against a standing opponent. Common mistake with this is, obviously I might kick Hugh's leg to make his leg light and pull his leg up. Usually when I want to reach for the leg, I'm going to try and hook, okay? Because when I hook, it makes it harder for Hugh to backstep, especially if he happened to want to put his hands on the mat and backstep. I can keep my hook can keep me attached while I attach to the leg and change to the far side, right? If I'm kicking and I'm reaching for the leg, obviously here Hugh can't really backstep while his leg's in the air, but if he posts on the mat and now he goes to backstep as I reach, I might miss everything, okay? Whereas if I put that hook there and he tries to backstep, he can't, and I can still potentially reach the leg and go underneath. So I push with my knee into Hugh's knee, making his leg light. I'm hooking the leg, I'm turning to the side, not giving space for the underhook, bringing my shoulder forward, like so, right? Once I've realized Hugh's staying up, I'm gonna reach underneath the ankle and switch to my other side, keeping my knee tight to my body. My knee pushes and I keep my hook so I can get my second foot to kick. Once I'm there, I'm gonna bring Hugh's hands down to the mat by kicking on a 45-degree direction upwards to lift his foot off the ground and stretch him out and pull him down using this leg. Hands hit the mat. I step on the top of the thigh at the back of the hamstring, push and get up on my hand. And I do the technical stand up to try to get on top. Next one we're going through is when Hugh turns his knee in as I start to stretch him out. So I start to make this leg light and he turns his knee in. And here the knee blocks me from getting towards the leg. Even if I hook, it's very hard to get underneath and get to X guard. In fact, if I try that, that's a bad idea. So I just, in a scenario like this, he's giving me access to De La Riva. So I just take my hook out, step back on the leg again, and I'm gonna turn and reach to the hip. Okay, so I change my hip from my right hip to my left hip. I reach to the hip and I'm going to try and pull him down to the mat immediately. All right, so if you watch this again, Hughes put his knee in, made it very hard to get at the leg. I step, I'm going to reach for the hip as I change from my left hip to my right hip. Okay, like so. All right, pulling down, and then with that, I'll start trying to pull Hughes' hips down to the mat into the berimbolo. So with this, when I change sides, I really want to sit forward to get the angle. So if you watch this, I'm in position here. Hughes turned his knee in. I step on the thigh. When I change angles, I actually sit up. Okay, you see that immediately puts me in good position to reach for the hip. And also instead of having just a grip on the ankle, I end up with a good overhook like this. Okay, so you'll see here, I've got just a regular grip on the ankle. As I change, I get an overhook, which is really good for pulling in deep. It keeps the angle. We'll talk more about that in the De La Riva section. Now, another thing that is a little bit counterintuitive for this is I kind of move my hips slightly in between the legs, just because I want to get on my left hip. And it's hard to roll. As soon as I roll back, Hugh's got weight on his leg, and it's harder to get around the corner as well as I like. If I focus on getting on my hip earlier by actually stepping on the top of the thigh, kind of lifting my hips up a little bit and scooting onto my left like that, that actually gets me on my left hip easier. So can you see, if I don't use my hands, I actually lift my hips up with a little back heel, and I turn onto my left side. Okay, as I sit forward and get that angle. So in total, it's going to look like this. Okay, so my hips actually shift a little bit to the inside of the ankle, as opposed to trying to slide to the outside where if Hugh's trying to square up, if he squares up and I try to go this way, it's actually hard to get around the corner. But if I move my hips, I get a faster, kind of swinging myself over. So as I'm entering the weighted position, Hugh turns his knee in, I step my foot back out, turn my hips to the inside, sit forward, get my angle, pull him down to start to enter the berimbolo. our last option against the standing opponent is that Hugh drops his knee to prevent me getting X guard or from swinging back to De La Riva. So I knock Hugh to the side, I start reaching for the leg, and he drops the knee. Or maybe, I say stand up again, maybe as he sees I'm reaching for the leg, he starts to drop down. Okay, cool. So immediately here, I want to keep his hips away, and I want to get the leg as light as possible and get good weight of positioning. So we're going to keep the hips away, maybe by stepping, maybe by hooking, and pendulum back, pull the foot up nice and high, and pretty much have my feet down near the shin now, like so. You might even look, if you didn't start with an underhook, which you may have started with, you might look in that same transition, if you hook well enough and give a good enough angle to start to pummel underneath for an underhook. Okay, so if I've got the foot dangling, I get the underhook. If it's more at the edge of the foot, then obviously I just keep my grip and potentially changing to a grip underneath. Okay, but I really want to keep the foot elevated here. Again, not too much on the thigh where he can start to put his feet down on the ground and start being more mobile. So again, as I'm entering against the standing opponent, I'm reaching for the leg. If he drops his hip, keep him away. Use whichever you can, might be whichever leg, till I can start to feel I can pull the leg up, pendulum, and get to the weighted position.
Just have a look at 3 different possibilities on entry into Wader and how you can work off these. So again, there is some crossover with the De La Riva section here too. So the first one here, so I'm going from De La Riva, I go to enter into Wader, and what commonly happens as you go to enter, you go to reach for the leg, and your opponent will drop to their knee or step away. So watch this, I go to reach, you see Luis takes his leg away. He knows that he doesn't want to let me reach that leg, which we'll see in a moment why, because I can get into X-guard, which X-guard would be probably a worse position to get stuck in than Wader. I'd rather be, if you were the person on top, you'd rather be in Wader than in X, because it's a little closer towards the finisher. It tends to be an upgrade. So he drops to his knee, and that lets me swing underneath to Wader. So we watch that again. As I go to reach for the leg, Luis will step that leg away from me, move back, he drops down to his knee, and it's hard for me to get into X-guard immediately, but I'm in the Wader position. This next one, Luis won't step back, and I'll be able to reach the leg and get into X-guard. So I'm going to reach towards the leg, and see or at least he didn't see it coming in time. I've managed to reach the leg. Usually I'd reach a little lower than that, but at least I've got the knee here, and that allows me to get into the X guard, which overall, so it's a modified X now, and then it will turn into an X guard itself when I change my leg position. There we are. So this would be probably a worse spot to be stuck on than before. So that's why most people will step back to avoid you gripping that leg, but that will give you the Wader entry. And then here is another option where Hugh turns his knee inward. So as I go, he like kind of collapses his knee in, which makes it very hard to reach that leg. All right. So that's why I step on the hip and I turn back around to get a good angle to come around for the De La Riva and the Berimbolo. So if you watch that again, you'll see, like I talk about, as his knee turns in, my hip will move out to the other side, and that's going to give me, like, I'll get onto my left hip, but shift my hips out to the right, and that's going to give me, there we are, okay, and then that gives me a really good angle to start pulling Hugh down towards the mat or trying to pull him down towards the mat for De La Riva attacks, and then spinning back again is often a good option to do from the Wader.